bringing this bill to the House, and I commend it to Select Committee. Kia ora tātou. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Mr. Speaker.
Reno Tirakatini.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Tēnā koro e ngā menita. Koutou rā ngā memo o te whare pāramata, tēnā koutou. Whakatohea iwi, te whānau mokomoko. Nau mai, hara mai. Ki roto I te whare pāramata I takatū nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, I'm very privileged and proud to speak in support of this bill, the Mokomoko Restoration of Character, Mana and Reputation Bill. Mr. Speaker, as you know, it's been a theme of my speeches on these settlement claims that have passed through this House. I've used the theme, to understand whakapapa is to understand Māori history. And today's history lesson, which has been fully traversed by the Honourable Minister, so I'll just give my abridged version. Today's history lesson is one of the most shameful in the history of our nation, but more particularly the history of one whānau, te whānau Mokomoko. Sir, the settlement bills that I've spoken on in the last couple of months have concerned the settlements in Poverty Bay, namely Rongowhakata and Ngai Tāmanugiri. And their story is of Te Koti and his rebels, and the start of the Ho-Ho Wars that spread throughout the North Island in the 1860s as Te Koti led his followers through the fastness of the Urewera, Central Plateau, and finally the safety of the Kingitanga in Te Rohe Pōtai, King Country. The Reverend Carl Volkner was a former Lutheran minister who transferred to the Anglican Church. He was stationed at Ōpōtiki in 1861. In 1864 and 65, the Reverend Volkner reported to Governor Grey of the movements of the Ho-Ho within his region. And in the mind of our ancestors of the old ways, this was tantamount to spying. So the chiefs of that time debated Volkner's fate, and the rest, as they say, Mr. Speaker, is history. But not so, Mr. Speaker, because the aftermath of the Volkner affair in 1866 is why we are here today, 145 years later. And on the flimsiest of circumstantial evidence, the rope used to hang Volkner was allegedly owned by the chief Mokomoko. He was imprisoned and taken to Auckland jail. He was tried and convicted and hanged at Auckland, where he was also buried. 123 years later, in October 1989, his kōiwi were disinterred and repatriated to Waiaua Pā near Ōpōtiki. Throughout this ordeal, Mokomoko maintained his innocence. Mr. Speaker, such were the ways of our ancestors that a rangatira of the status of Mokomoko were apt to compose a death dirge, a lament, a waiata full of pathos. Often these waiata were composed to remind their descendants of how their death came about and how mana must always be retained. The death of Mokomoko's waiata, the theme of Mokomoko's waiata is no different. And as has been mentioned earlier today, its opening lines are, Tangohia te taura I taku kaki, kia waiata au I taku waiata. As Mokomoko stood on the gallows facing his death, the aforementioned words were spoken. Today, the descendants of Mokomoko, ngā uri o Mokomoko, use those prophetic words as a pepeha, a tribal whānau saying to mean, have the strength to speak up and the truth shall not be silenced. In his waiata, Mokomoko laments how he is treated like a common criminal. Kei te hori te tangata tēnei au ki te rawake. Halfway through his poignant waiata, composed on the gallows of Auckland Jail in 1866, with the rope around his neck, Mokomoko pleads to his descendants. He warawere noa, te eke noa, I te kaipuke. He ahi mumura te pānga mai o te whakamā. Remember how I was taken aboard a ship, chained and in shackles. The memory of my shame burns me so deep. Mr. Speaker, our ancestors of long ago were a proud people, and at all times maintained and upheld the mana of his whānau, hapu and iwi. But more importantly, he also practiced his own personal mana. Sir, in the warfare practiced by our tupuna, there was more honour to die in battle than to be taken alive as a slave of the victorious tribes. To be bound, to be a here, a slave, was the highest indignity and a shame upon the family as well. And so the whakamā of being held captive was too much for many of our rangatira who interacted with our early justice system. And just like being held in remand or waiting for the justice system wheels to be cranking on and the process followed through, again, that was a serious whakamā that was inflicted upon many of our people. He ware noa te eke noa I te kaipuke, he ahi mumura te pānga mai o te whakamā. Remember how I was taken on board ship, chained and shackled. The memory of the shame burns me deep. Proud words from a shamed man, not afraid to meet his death. Today, in this debate, Mr. Speaker, we begin the process to ensure Mokomoko's descendants have the shame of their tupuna erased, wiped clean, his mana reasserted, and they can begin to write new waiata. He and his descendants deserve no less. And so I mihi to the descendants of Mokomoko here today, who've travelled all this way, and I also think of my own whānau connections. My cousins, my many Mokomoko cousins in Te Waipounamu, my grand uncle, we knew him as John Bull Mokomoko, Te One Apirida Mokomoko, who married my grand aunt, Te Rau Oriwa Tregurthan Tiri Kātini. And I know many of them are tuning in and watching this first reading today, so I mihi to all of them and to all of the Mokomoko whānau throughout the motu. In June of 1992, the Governor-General issued a free pardon to Mokomoko. The whānau Mokomoko were, however, concerned that the pardon was drafted without consultation and the family did not expressly restore his character, mana, reputation, or for him and his descendants. So, as has been traversed in the kōrero so far, there are several parts to this new act that finally make good that pardon. And among the additions, the government will acknowledge that the free pardon did not expressly restore the character, mana and reputation of Mokomoko, nor the character, mana and reputation of his uri. Mr. Speaker, the upholding of mana is a constant struggle in today's world. Every day the mana of Māori is trampled upon and disrespected by ignorant New Zealanders, driven by an even more ignorant Pākehā media. But if there is one word that resounds through the languages of the Pacific, it is the word mana. And its meaning never changes as you paddle from island to island. It even means the same up north into Tai Tokerau as it does down in Te Waipounamu. Mana is authority, prestige, reputation, things that are important to all Polynesian cultures, especially the Māori. And so I commend the passage of this bill through the House. I look forward to participating in the Māori Affairs Select Committee, and I mihi to everybody here today. Kia ora no tātou.
Catherine Delahunty.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare. He mihi nui ki te whānau